The email hit Elena Ruiz at 6:43 a.m. not gently. It dropped into her inbox like something that was never meant to land there. Subject line: Project Northbridge Final Staffing. Her name was not supposed to be on that thread. Elena knew it the second she saw the sender. Marcus Hale, her director. Her stomach tightened before she even opened it. She should have ignored it. Should have waited. Should have pretended she never saw it. Instead, her finger moved. Click. The spreadsheet opened. Rows of names filled the screen. Senior analysts, client leads, 2 new hires who still asked where the break room was. Elena scanned automatically. Habit from 11 years of catching small mistakes before anyone else noticed them. Then she saw her name. Ruiz, Elena. Her breath caught. Not because she was included, because of the word beside it. Hold. Not assigned, not pending. Hold. Elena stared at the screen. The office around her was still half asleep. Lights buzzing overhead. Someone down the hall coughing into a paper towel. The copier warming up with that slow mechanical hum she had heard almost every morning of her adult life. But the word did not change. Hold. Her chest felt suddenly too tight. 11 years. 11 years of staying late when others logged off. 11 years of fixing reports that were not hers to fix. 11 years of hearing, "You are so reliable," in a tone that never once sounded like promotion. Her mouse hovered over the email thread. There were replies. Several. The latest one was time-stamped 6:39 a.m. 4 minutes ago. Her pulse began to thud heavier. She clicked. Marcus Hale wrote only one line. Remove Ruiz from active review until further notice. Elena's fingers went cold on the mouse. For a second, the world did something strange. Not spinning, not blurring, just narrowing. Like the edges of the morning pulled slightly inward. A reply sat directly underneath. From Senior Operations, understood, we will handle internally. Handle internally. Elena swallowed. Her throat felt dry in a way coffee would not fix. Behind her, chairs were starting to roll across carpet. Keyboards waking up. The low morning murmur of people arriving. Normal sounds. Normal morning. Except her heart would not slow down, because something ugly had already started forming in her stomach. Something that had nothing to do with one email. It was the memory, 3 months ago, quarterly review. Marcus across the table with that careful professional smile. "You are doing solid work, Elena. Solid, always solid, never exceptional, never leadership, never ready." Her grip tightened on the mouse. The cursor trembled slightly, then her phone buzzed on the desk. Hard enough to make her flinch. Incoming meeting alert. 8 a.m. daily check-in. Elena forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Normal. Act normal. That rule had carried her through more meetings than she could count. If you look calm, people assume you are calm. If you keep moving, no one asks questions. She minimized the email. Opened her regular reports. Started typing. Numbers filled the screen in neat, controlled rows. Except her fingers were moving too fast. She mistyped twice. Elena never mistyped. Her jaw tightened. Focus. Just focus. But her eyes kept drifting back to the corner of the monitor where the email tab still glowed faintly, like it was waiting, like it knew. Across the floor, the conference room lights flicked on. Through the glass wall, she saw Marcus Hale walk in with a tablet tucked under his arm. Calm. Relaxed. Like a man whose morning was going exactly as planned. Elena's stomach dropped another inch, because now she could not stop thinking about the timing. 6:39 a.m. Remove Ruiz from active review. 6:43 a.m. The email lands in her inbox by mistake. Her pulse started to climb again, slow, heavy, deliberate. Something was wrong. Not office politics wrong, not miscommunication wrong. Something quieter. Something deliberate. Marcus set his tablet down inside the conference room and began arranging papers with slow, unhurried movements. Elena watched him for 1 second too long, then 2. Her chest felt tight again. Because for the first time in 11 years at this company, a thought slipped in that she could not push back out. What if this was not an accident? Her mouse drifted back toward the email tab, paused, hovered. Every sensible part of her brain said to leave it alone. Do your job, keep your head down. That was how you survived in places like this, but her finger moved anyway. Click. The email reopened. The word was still there. Hold. Elena's reflection stared faintly back at her from the edge of the monitor. Her face looked calm. Too calm. But under the desk her hands had started to shake, and down the hall the conference room door began to close. Elena did not realize she was holding her breath until her chest started to ache. The word on the screen still had not changed. Hold. Her reflection in the monitor looked steady, but her fingers felt thin and distant, like they belonged to someone else sitting in her chair. She forced herself to move. Minimize the email, open the morning report, type. Numbers usually calmed her. Clean columns, predictable totals. Things either balanced or they did not. Today the spreadsheet swam slightly. She mistyped a figure, deleted it, typed again. Behind her the office was fully waking now. The smell of burnt office coffee drifted through the air. Someone laughed too loudly near the printers. A chair rolled fast across the carpet. Normal sounds. Except her pulse would not settle. Her eyes flicked to the glass conference room again. Marcus Hale was inside now, seated at the far end of the table. Relaxed posture, one sleeve slightly rolled. Talking to someone Elena could not fully see from this angle. He did not look like a man who had just quietly removed someone from a major project. He looked comfortable. That bothered her more than the email. Elena pressed her palms lightly against the desk surface, grounding herself. Think. Do not spiral. There were explanations. Distribution errors happened. Autofill mistakes happened, except... Her stomach tightened again, because the wording in that message had been too clean. Remove Ruiz from active review until further notice. Not review her role. Not confirm placement. Remove. That was not sloppy language. That was deliberate language. Her phone buzzed softly again. New email. Elena hesitated for half a second before opening it. Internal calendar update. Project Northbridge kickoff meeting scheduled for next week. Her eyes moved automatically to the attendee list. Names scrolled down the screen. Senior staff. Junior analysts. Even one of the new hires who still asked where supply forms were kept. Elena's chest went tight. Her name was not there. A slow heat crept up the back of her neck, not sharp anger. Worse, that familiar hollow embarrassment that settles in before your brain finishes processing. She leaned back slightly in her chair. The cushion gave a soft sigh of air. Across the room, Marcus stood and moved toward the conference room door. Elena's heart gave one heavy thud. The door opened. Voices spilled briefly into the hallway. Marcus stepped out. Tablet still in hand, expression neutral and unreadable. He didn't look toward her, not even by accident. He walked past her row of cubicles with the same easy stride he always had. Like nothing had shifted. Like no decisions had already been made about her future at 8 o'clock in the morning. Elena kept her eyes on her screen. Act normal. Always act normal. Marcus slowed near the end of the aisle, speaking quietly to someone from operations. Elena was not trying to listen. She told herself that clearly, firmly. But then her name floated back through the low morning noise. Ruiz. Soft, casual, like an afterthought. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. Marcus's voice again, lower now. Just keep her where she is for the moment. The words slid under her skin. Not loud enough to draw attention. Not quiet enough to miss. Elena stared at the blinking cursor on her screen. Keep her where she is. For the moment. Her throat tightened, because suddenly the email did not feel like an isolated mistake. It felt like the first piece of something that had already been moving for a while. Her chest rose slowly with one controlled breath, then another. Across the office, someone dropped a stack of folders. The sharp slap against the floor made Elena flinch harder than she meant to. A few heads turned. She quickly lowered her gaze back to her monitor. Normal. Stay normal, but inside something had begun to shift in a way she could not ignore anymore. Not panic, not yet, something colder, more focused. For 11 years, Elena Ruiz had survived this company by being careful, by being quiet, by being reliable. But as Marcus's footsteps faded down the hallway, one uncomfortable thought settled heavily into her chest. If they were already making moves behind closed doors, then she was already behind, and for the first time that morning, Elena's hands stopped shaking. Not because she felt better, because she was starting to pay very close attention. Elena did not move for a long time. The office noise returned to its normal rhythm around her. Phones ringing, someone arguing softly with the printer. The low hum of the air conditioning pushing cold air across the ceiling vents. But her focus had narrowed. Sharp, quiet, the way it used to during month-end close when one wrong number could wreck an entire report. She opened the Northbridge email again. Slow this time, deliberate. The spreadsheet filled the screen. Names, departments, assignments. Her eyes went straight to her own row. Ruiz, Elena, status, hold. Her jaw tightened. Elena hovered the cursor over the column header. Then she scrolled sideways, scanning the internal notes field. Most rows were blank. A few had short tags, client-facing, travel-ready, lead candidate. When she reached her own row, the notes column was not empty. It had been collapsed earlier. Now she clicked the tiny arrow. The cell expanded. 2 words appeared. Limited exposure. Elena's stomach dropped. Not a mistake, not random. That phrase had been entered manually. Someone had typed that about her. Her fingers pressed flat against the desk. Limited exposure, the words felt clinical, polite, and somehow worse than anything openly cruel, because she knew exactly what they meant in rooms like this. Not strong enough in meetings. Not confident enough with clients. Not leadership material, the old familiar script. Except this time she was looking directly at the source. Her pulse started to pick up again. Not fast, heavy, controlled. She scrolled upward through the email chain. Careful. Reading every line now, timestamps, recipients, internal replies. Most of it was routine project chatter. Until one earlier message caught her eye. Sent 3 days ago from Marcus Hale, subject. Preliminary staffing concerns. Elena leaned slightly closer to the screen. Her shoulders had gone tight without her noticing. The message was short. We need to be realistic about who can represent the team externally. Some roles require stronger presence. Her throat went dry. Below that message sat a reply from someone in senior operations. Understood. Recommend adjustments before final list. Elena sat back slowly in her chair. The cushion gave another soft sigh. 3 days. This conversation had started 3 days ago. While she was still staying late to finish the quarterly variance report Marcus had personally thanked her for, a small, bitter pressure rose behind her ribs. Not explosive anger, something more humiliating. Because suddenly the pattern was too clear. Praise in public. Quiet edits in private. Her phone buzzed again. Elena almost ignored it. Almost. Then she glanced down. Internal chat notification. From Jenna in payroll. You come into the 8:30 check-in. Elena stared at the message for a second too long. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. She typed slowly, "Be there in a minute. Sent." She did not stand up, not yet. Instead, her mouse moved again. Back to the spreadsheet, back to her row. Limited exposure. Elena's eyes moved to the surrounding names, one by one, comparing. Most of the junior analysts had no notes at all. One had new but promising. Another had client ready after training. Her jaw tightened further. She had been here 11 years. 11. And someone had quietly tagged her like a risk item. Across the office, laughter burst suddenly near the break area. Bright. Carefree. It made something twist sharply in her chest. Because she knew how this worked. Not official, not documented in any HR handbook, just a slow repositioning. Fewer opportunities, fewer meetings, less visibility, until one day you were technically still employed but somehow no longer moving forward. Elena exhaled slowly through her nose. Her reflection in the monitor looked composed, almost detached, but inside, something had finally crossed a line. Because this was no longer a vague feeling, no longer office paranoia. This was documented, quiet, professional, and very real. Her cursor moved to the email header. She hovered over the recipients list, paused, then clicked to expand the full thread. More names appeared, including someone she did not expect, human resources. Elena's pulse gave one hard beat, so HR already knew. Of course they did. A slow, uncomfortable heat spread through her chest. Not panic, not yet, but the ground under her 11-year routine no longer felt solid. Down the hall, the 8:30 meeting reminder chimed faintly from multiple desks. Chairs began to move, people standing, conversations shifting. Elena finally pushed her chair back. The wheels rolled softly over the carpet. For a moment, she just sat there, hands resting lightly on the edge of her desk, breathing slow, measured. Because something inside her had changed in the last 15 minutes. For 11 years, Elena Ruiz had survived by staying quiet and useful, by trusting that solid work eventually spoke for itself. But as she reached for her notebook and stood up, one clear thought settled heavily into place. If they were already documenting her limitations, then staying quiet was no longer going to protect her. The conference room felt colder than the rest of the floor. Elena noticed it the second she stepped inside. Not actual temperature. Something else. The long table was already half full. Laptops open, coffee cups sweating onto paper coasters. The faint smell of dry erase markers still hanging in the air from the previous meeting. Jenna from payroll gave her a quick smile as Elena slid into an empty chair near the middle. Normal. Everything looked normal. Except Elena could feel her own pulse too clearly in her throat. Marcus sat at the head of the table, tablet propped neatly in front of him. Calm posture, neutral expression. The same composed energy he always carried into these check-ins. Like nothing had shifted that morning. Like her name had not been quietly moved into a holding category before sunrise. Elena placed her notebook down carefully. Her pen rested across the page. She did not write yet. Marcus began the meeting in his usual steady tone, reviewing weekly priorities, project timelines, the kind of routine updates Elena could normally track without effort. Today, the words slid past her. Not because she was distracted, because she was watching, listening differently. Every time Marcus's eyes moved around the table, Elena noticed the pattern. Who he lingered on, who he skipped. When his gaze passed over her, it did not pause, not even half a second. A small, familiar tightness formed behind her ribs. There it was, the thing she'd always suspected but never proven: limited exposure. The phrase echoed quietly in her head. Marcus tapped the table lightly with one finger. Next week, we begin preliminary client briefings for Northbridge. Elena's grip on her pen tightened. Around the table, several people straightened slightly in their chairs. Subtle but obvious. The kind of body shift that happens when opportunity enters the room. Marcus continued. I will be selecting a small group for the initial external meetings. Small group? Elena kept her face neutral, her breathing slow, professional. Inside, something uneasy pressed harder against her chest. Marcus's eyes moved down the table. David, you will join the first client call. David nodded quickly, almost too quickly. Marcus continued down the list. 2 more names, then another. Elena's pulse began to climb. Slow, heavy. She kept her gaze on her notebook. Did not look up. Did not give anything away. The silence stretched for 1 beat too long. Then Marcus closed the list with a soft tap of his tablet. That will be the initial team. Elena's pen had stopped moving. She had not realized when. Around the table, chairs shifted again. Quiet energy. People mentally recalibrating their week. Marcus moved smoothly into the next agenda item. Budget adjustments. Like nothing important had just happened. Elena stared down at the blank line in her notebook. Her name had not been called. Not surprising, not after what she had seen. Still, the absence landed heavier than she expected. Because hearing it inside your own head was one thing. Watching it unfold in real time was another. Her throat tightened slightly. Across the table, Jenna leaned closer and whispered softly, "You okay?" Elena forced a small nod. "Yeah, just tired." The lie came easily, too easily. The meeting continued, numbers, deadlines, routine updates, but Elena was no longer hearing the details. She was replaying the pattern. The email, the note in the spreadsheet, limited exposure. And now this, step by step, quiet, professional, clean. The kind of sidelining no one could formally complain about. Marcus wrapped the meeting 10 minutes later. People began closing laptops, stacking notebooks, standing in small clusters of conversation. Elena moved more slowly. Deliberate, controlled. She gathered her pen, closed her notebook, kept her expression carefully neutral. As she stood, Marcus finally looked in her direction. For half a second, just enough to register. Then his attention shifted past her to someone else already speaking. The message was subtle, but clear. Elena felt something in her chest settle into place. Not panic, not humiliation, something sharper. Because for the first time that morning, the uncertainty was gone. This was not in her head. This was not bad timing. This was movement, quiet movement. And as Elena stepped out into the hallway with the rest of the team, one steady thought formed with uncomfortable clarity. If they were already easing her out of the room, she was going to need to decide very quickly what she was going to do about it. Elena did not go back to work right away. Instead, she walked past her cubicle and kept going. Past the printers, past the supply cabinet, all the way to the small break room at the far end of the floor, where the lights always hummed too loudly and the coffee always tasted slightly burnt. It was empty. Good. She stepped inside and let the door swing closed behind her. For a moment, she just stood there with her hands resting on the counter, breathing slowly through her nose. In, out. The microwave clock blinked 6:59 in soft green numbers. Someone had left a yogurt cup in the sink. Normal office clutter, normal morning, except her chest still felt tight, because now the pattern was undeniable. The email, the note, the meeting, piece by piece, careful, clean, professional. Elena reached for the coffee pot out of habit, then stopped halfway. She was not thirsty. Her hands just needed something to do. They were still slightly unsteady. That bothered her more than anything else. She prided herself on control, on being the calm one, the reliable one, the one who never made scenes, never pushed too hard, never gave anyone a reason to label her difficult. Limited exposure. The phrase slid back into her mind like it belonged there. Elena pressed her lips together. Her reflection in the small break room window looked composed, too composed. But under the surface, something raw was starting to push upward, not explosive, not yet, but close. Her phone buzzed softly against the counter. She glanced down. New internal email from Marcus Hale. Subject, quick follow-up. Elena's pulse gave one heavy beat. She opened it. Short message. Ruiz, when you have a moment today, stop by my office. Need to realign priorities for the quarter. Realign priorities. Her jaw tightened slowly. The timing was almost impressive. Sideline her in the meeting. Then schedule the calm, professional conversation afterward. Clean, controlled, deniable. Elena set her phone down carefully on the counter. For a long moment she did nothing. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook again. Not the one she used for meetings. Her personal one. The one she almost never opened at work. She flipped to a blank page. Her pen hovered, paused, then began to move. 6:39 a.m., remove Ruiz from active review. 7:12 a.m., kickoff meeting invite, not included. 8:30 a.m., client team announced, not selected. The ink pressed slightly deeper into the paper than usual. Elena stopped writing and stared at the list. Her breathing had gone very steady now, very controlled. Because something inside her had finally shifted from confusion into clarity. This was not random, and more importantly, it was not finished. Across the hall, someone laughed loudly again. The sound grated across her nerves. For 11 years, Elena had survived by trusting the system, by believing that if you stayed consistent, stayed professional, eventually the work spoke for itself. But sitting here now with the quiet hum of the break room lights overhead, that belief felt thinner than it used to. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. From Jenna. Everything good with you today? Elena stared at the screen for a second, then typed back slowly. Yeah, just catching up on a few things. Sent. She slipped the phone back into her bag, closed the notebook. But her hand stayed resting on the cover. Because under the calm surface she was presenting to the office, something unfamiliar was taking shape. Not panic, not even anger. Something colder, more deliberate. For the first time in 11 years, Elena Ruiz was no longer assuming the situation would correct itself. And as she pushed away from the break room counter and reached for the door handle, one quiet realization settled firmly into place. If Marcus wanted to realign priorities today, then she needed to be very careful about what exactly he thought she did not already know. Elena waited until 10:14 a.m. before going to Marcus's office. Not immediately, not too fast. Timing mattered in places like this. If she showed up the second he called, she would look anxious. If she waited too long, she would look defensive. So she worked, answered emails, reviewed 2 vendor reports, fixed a formatting error in a budget sheet that had nothing to do with her role, but somehow always ended up on her desk anyway. Normal, controlled, except the quiet pressure in her chest never fully left. At 10:13, she closed the last spreadsheet. At 10:14, she stood. Marcus's office sat at the far corner of the floor, glass walls on two sides, blinds half lowered to create that careful illusion of privacy leadership seemed to love. His door was slightly open. Elena knocked lightly against the frame. Marcus looked up from his screen with the same neutral expression he always wore in meetings. Professional, measured, predictable. "Elena, come in." She stepped inside, closed the door gently behind her. The office smelled faintly of expensive coffee and lemon furniture polish. Everything on Marcus's desk was aligned with quiet precision. Tablet squared to the edge. Pen parallel to the keyboard. Control lived in this room. Marcus leaned back slightly in his chair. "Have a seat." Elena sat. Back straight, hands resting lightly in her lap. The version of herself she had perfected over 11 years. Marcus studied her for a second too long. Not hostile, just assessing. "I wanted to touch base about the upcoming quarter." His tone was smooth, practiced. Elena nodded once. "Of course." Marcus folded his hands on the desk. "We are making some structural adjustments to the Northbridge rollout." There it was. Clean language, no friction. Elena kept her face neutral. Marcus continued. "Nothing negative on your performance. You have been consistently solid." Solid. The word landed exactly where it always did. Marcus went on, voice calm and reasonable. "But some of the external client work requires a slightly different presentation profile." Presentation profile. Elena felt something small and sharp twist behind her ribs. Limited exposure. The spreadsheet flashed briefly in her mind. She kept her breathing slow, professional. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "For now, I want you focused on internal analytics support. High-value work, critical to the project's success. For now." Elena let a quiet second pass before she spoke. "Measured, careful. I noticed a preliminary list this morning." Marcus's eyes flickered. Just once, small, fast. But Elena saw it. He had not expected that. Her pulse gave one heavy beat. Marcus's expression reset almost immediately. Yes, that distribution went out earlier than intended. Smooth recovery. Elena tilted her head slightly. Still calm, still polite. There was a note in the file. Marcus did not move. But something in the room shifted half a degree, barely visible. What note? His voice was still even. Elena held his gaze now. Limited exposure. Silence settled into the office. Not loud, not dramatic, just thick enough to feel. Marcus's fingers tapped once against the desk. Soft, controlled. Then he exhaled slowly. That is internal shorthand. Nothing you need to be concerned about. Nothing you need to be concerned about. Elena felt the first real spark of heat move through her chest. Because that sentence was too familiar, too rehearsed. Her hands tightened slightly in her lap, still invisible from above the desk. She spoke again, quieter this time. "I have been client-ready for several years." Another small pause. Marcus's jaw shifted almost imperceptibly. "We are simply aligning strengths where they create the most impact. Corporate language. Polished, empty." Elena felt it then. Not just frustration. Something sharper. Because for the first time, she was watching the machine work in real time. And she was sitting inside it. Marcus's voice softened slightly, the tone leaders used when they believed they were being reasonable. "You are a valuable part of this team, Elena. Valuable." Another word that never quite meant promotion. Never quite meant forward movement. Elena inhaled slowly through her nose. For a brief second, something raw threatened to break through the careful mask she had worn for over a decade. The tiredness, the quiet humiliation, The 11 years of being exactly useful enough to keep, but never enough to advance. Her fingers curled once against her palm, then released. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, almost calm, understood. Marcus nodded once, clearly satisfied the conversation had stayed contained. Professional, controlled, manageable. But as Elena stood and reached for the door, something inside her had finally shifted, past the point of quiet acceptance. Because now she knew two things with absolute clarity. First, this was deliberate. Second, Marcus Hale believed she was still going to play along. And walking back toward her desk, Elena Ruiz felt something cold and focused settle firmly into place. He was about to find out how wrong that assumption was. Elena did not go back to work right away. She sat down at her desk, opened her main analytics file, placed both hands on the keyboard, and did absolutely nothing for almost a full minute. From the outside, she looked the same as always. Posture straight, face calm, screen filled with neat columns of numbers. But inside, the air felt different, thinner, sharper, because Marcus had just confirmed what the spreadsheet already suggested. This was not a misunderstanding. It was positioning, careful, quiet, professional. Her fingers finally began to move across the keys. Not fast, not rushed, measured. If anyone glanced over, they would see Elena Ruiz doing exactly what she had done for 11 years. Working, reliable, invisible. But her mind was no longer an autopilot. It was mapping, replaying. 10:14 a.m. Marcus's office. Internal shorthand. Nothing you need to be concerned about. Her jaw tightened slightly. People did not use language that clean unless the decision was already made. Her eyes moved slowly across her screen, then drifted. Back to the email tab. Still open. Still waiting. Elena clicked it again. The Northbridge thread expanded across her monitor. This time, she did not just read, she studied. Every timestamp, every recipient, every quiet adjustment in the wording. Something her old supervisor once told her surfaced in the back of her mind. Big decisions never start in meetings. They start inside emails no one pays attention to. Her pulse picked up. Slow, intentional. She scrolled further up the thread. Older messages appeared. Planning notes, budget approvals. Then one line caught her attention. Sent late last night. From Senior Operations. We will flag risk variables before external rollout. Elena's fingers stilled. Risk variables. Her eyes moved carefully down the distribution list. Marcus, Operations, HR, all looped together. Her chest tightened again, not panic, recognition, because now the language was forming a pattern. Limited exposure, realign priorities. Risk variables. Clean words, safe words. Words that moved people without ever sounding personal. Elena leaned back slowly in her chair. The cushion released a quiet breath of air. Around her, the office buzzed normally. Someone arguing softly about travel receipts. Phones ringing, keyboard chatter. No one here knew what was happening in the quiet corners of internal email chains. No one except her. Her phone buzzed against the desk. She glanced down. Calendar reminder. Northbridge preliminary prep call. Scheduled for later this afternoon. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. She opened the invite, participant list. Still not there. But this time, something new caught her attention. A shared folder link attached at the bottom. Northbridge working files. Access granted to core team. Elena's pulse gave one heavy beat. Her cursor hovered over the link, paused. She should not open it. Technically, practically, politically, every cautious instinct she had built over 11 years told her to leave it alone. But something inside her had already shifted too far. Click, the folder opened, Clean directory structure, client briefs, budget projections, presentation drafts, and one subfolder near the bottom, staffing review. Elena's fingers moved before she could second-guess it. The file opened, rows of names, evaluation columns, color-coded notes. Her breath slowed, then she found her row again. Ruiz, Elena, status, deferred. Her stomach dropped. The note beside it was longer this time. Internal only. Maintain current role. Monitor external readiness. Monitor. Elena stared at the screen. Her reflection in the black edge of the monitor looked pale but composed. Too composed. Because now the picture was complete. This was not just about one project. They were tracking her. Quietly. Professionally. Like a variable that needed to be managed. Across the office, someone burst into laughter again. Bright, carefree. It grated against her nerves. For 11 years, Elena had believed steady work eventually spoke for itself. But sitting here now, staring at the word monitor beside her name, that belief finally cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let something colder through. Her fingers curled slowly against the edge of the desk, then relaxed, her breathing steadied, her pulse slowed, because one uncomfortable truth had just settled fully into place. They thought she was passive, predictable, safe to quietly reposition. Elena closed the staffing file carefully, minimized the folder, returned to her analytics screen. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside, something precise and patient had just come fully online. If they were already documenting her, then it was time she started documenting them. Elena did not rush. That was the first decision she made. If she moved too fast, she would look reactive, emotional. Exactly the profile they already seemed to have quietly assigned to her. So she worked. Answered routine emails, updated the vendor variant sheet, sent 2 clean, professional replies to requests that technically were not even her responsibility. From the outside, Elena Ruiz looked exactly the same as she had yesterday. Reliable, steady, contained, but in the background something new had started. At 11:32 a.m., she opened a blank document. No title, no formatting, just a clean white page. Her fingers rested lightly on the keyboard for a moment. Then she began to type. March, 6:39 a.m. directive issued to remove me from active review. She paused. Not emotional, not dramatic, just factual. The way good documentation should be. She continued. 7:12 a.m. Northbridge kickoff invite sent, not included. 8:30 a.m. Client team announced, not selected. 10:14 a.m. meeting with Marcus. Verbal repositioning to internal support. Elena stopped typing. Read the list once, then again. Her breathing remained slow and even. Because this was no longer about reacting. It was about clarity. Across the office, the lunchtime shift had started. Food containers opening. The faint smell of takeout noodles drifting through the air. Chairs rolling back as people stood to stretch. Normal day. Except Elena's focus had narrowed to a quiet point. Her phone buzzed softly. New message. From Marcus. Quick reminder. Please prioritize the internal analytics deck this week. Elena stared at the screen. There was nothing overtly wrong with the message, polite, professional, routine. Which made it more interesting. Because the timing was too clean. She typed back. Understood. I will have an updated version by tomorrow afternoon. Send. She set the phone down, then returned to the blank document. Her fingers hovered, then added one more line. 11:34 a.m. redirected to internal analytics priority. She leaned back slightly in her chair. For the first time all morning, her hands were completely steady. Not numb, not shaky, steady, because something inside her had shifted from uncertainty into focus. If this was simply office politics, the pattern would eventually blur. But if this was structured repositioning, the pattern would tighten. Elena's eyes drifted back to the Northbridge folder, still open in the background, still accessible. That alone was interesting. If they truly meant to move quietly, access usually narrowed first. Instead, her permissions remained untouched. For now, her jaw set slightly. Careful. Do not overreach. She minimized the folder, saved her document. Then, after a brief pause, she copied the file to her personal encrypted drive. The progress bar moved slowly across the screen. 20%, 40, 70, complete. Elena closed the window calmly. No sudden movements, no visible tension. Just another employee finishing routine work before lunch. Across the aisle, Jenna walked past holding a salad container. "You heading out soon?" Elena gave a small, easy nod. In a bit. Jenna smiled and kept moving. Normal interaction. Normal tone. Elena waited until Jenna disappeared around the corner before her gaze returned to her monitor. Her reflection looked composed, professional, unbothered. Exactly the version of her they seemed to believe they were managing. But under that calm surface, something had fully locked into place. Not panic, not anger. Precision. Because for 11 years, Elena Ruiz had played defense in this building. Quiet work. Careful steps. Trust the system. Now, as she closed the last window and reached for her notebook, one clear thought settled firmly into her mind. If they were already adjusting her trajectory behind closed doors. She was done being the only one in the room without a record of what was actually happening. By early afternoon, the office had settled into its usual post-lunch slump. Lights still bright. Energy slightly lower. The quiet hum of keyboards filled the space like background static. Elena kept working. Outwardly, she finalized the analytics deck Marcus had mentioned. Clean charts, clear annotations, no errors. The kind of work that had kept her safely in the reliable category for over a decade. But her attention kept splitting in two directions. One part stayed on the spreadsheet in front of her. The other watched the rhythm of the floor. Who moved where? Who spoke to whom? At 2:18 p.m., Marcus stepped out of his office again, tablet in hand. Phone pressed to his ear, his tone low but focused. Elena did not turn her head. She did not need to. The reflection in her monitor gave her enough. He paced slowly near the glass wall, voice controlled. "Yes, we are keeping the external team tight for now." A pause. Then quieter. "No, Ruiz will stay internal." The words slid across the office air like something meant to dissolve before landing. Elena's fingers stopped on the keyboard. Only for a second. Then they resumed typing. Measured. Steady. Like nothing had just shifted again. Marcus continued walking. Voice still low. "We just need to monitor consistency over the next quarter." Monitor. There was that word again. Elena felt the small cold point in her chest sharpen slightly, because patterns were no longer subtle. They were repeating, predictable, which meant useful. Marcus ended the call and disappeared back into his office. The glass door clicked softly shut behind him. Elena finished the last slide of the analytics deck, saved the file, sent the update exactly as requested, subject line clean, tone professional. No hint of friction. Then she opened her documentation file again. Her fingers moved calmly across the keyboard. 2:18 p.m. overheard Marcus confirm internal placement and continued monitoring. She paused, reread the line, adjusted one word, changed overheard to confirmed via direct statement. Precision mattered. She saved the file, backed it up again, then closed the window. Across the aisle, someone dropped a pen and muttered under their breath. Normal office noise, normal afternoon. But Elena could feel the shape of the situation much more clearly now. This was not a sudden decision. It was staged. Quiet checkpoints, language carefully selected to stay defensible, realign, limited exposure, monitor. Each word chosen to sound reasonable in isolation. Together, they formed something else. Elena leaned back slowly in her chair. Her shoulders were no longer tight. Her breathing fully steady, because uncertainty had been replaced by something far more useful. Clarity. Her phone buzzed softly again. New email from Marcus. Deck looks good. Let us sync tomorrow morning on next steps. Elena read the message once, then typed back, glad it is helpful. I will be ready. Send, polite, neutral, exactly what he expected. She set the phone down carefully, then allowed herself one slow breath. Because for the first time all day, the emotional weight had shifted. Not gone, but redirected. Earlier that morning, she'd still been reacting, trying to understand what was happening around her. Now, she was watching, tracking, mapping the edges of the decision as it unfolded in real time. Across the office, the afternoon light had shifted slightly through the windows, casting longer reflections across the glass walls. Elena glanced once toward Marcus's closed door, then back to her screen. Her expression remained calm, professional, unchanged. But under that surface, one quiet realization had fully taken hold. If they intended to manage her trajectory quietly, then they had just given her the timeline she needed. And Elena Ruiz had always been very good with timelines. The next morning started too quietly. Elena noticed it the moment she stepped off the elevator. No printer jam, no early chatter near the break room, just the low, steady hum of the lights and the distant whir of the HVAC pushing cold air across the ceiling vents. Her pulse stayed even as she walked to her desk. She had slept. Not well, but enough to let the sharp emotional edge from yesterday settle into something more controlled. Her computer came to life with its usual soft glow. Inbox, 9 new emails, nothing urgent, nothing unusual, which, at this point, Elena knew did not mean much. She set her bag down carefully, opened the analytics deck Marcus had praised yesterday, reviewed it one more time. Clean, tight, no loose edges. At 8:58 a.m., her calendar reminder appeared. Sync with Marcus. 9 a.m. Elena closed the deck, smoothed an invisible crease along the edge of her notebook, then stood. Marcus's office door was already open when she approached. He glanced up as she knocked lightly. Right on time, Elena stepped inside, closed the door behind her. Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. Have a seat. His tone was easy, professional. Like yesterday's conversation had settled everything neatly into place. Elena sat, back straight, hands resting lightly together. Marcus turned his tablet slightly toward her. I reviewed your latest analytics pass. He tapped once on the screen. Strong work, as expected, as expected. Elena gave a small nod. Thank you. Marcus leaned back slightly. Here's what I am thinking for next steps. There was that phrase again, controlled, forward-moving. He continued. For the next phase of Northbridge, I want you embedded deeper in internal support, data validation, modeling integrity, back-end oversight. Elena listened without interrupting. Her breathing slow, even. Marcus's voice stayed smooth. This keeps your strengths fully utilized while we stabilize the external rollout. Keeps your strengths utilized. Elena felt the familiar tight pressure behind her ribs. The careful compliment that was not really a compliment. Marcus studied her face briefly, as if waiting for resistance, for disappointment, for emotion. Elena gave him none of it. She simply nodded once. Understood. For a fraction of a second, something unreadable flickered in Marcus's eyes. Maybe surprise, maybe relief. Hard to tell. He continued, "We will reassess positioning after this quarter's performance cycle." Reassess, future tense. Always just far enough away to stay non-committal. Elena let the silence stretch for one controlled breath. Then she spoke. Calm. Measured. "Just so I'm clear." Marcus's attention sharpened slightly. Elena held his gaze. "Are there specific readiness metrics you want me prioritizing?" The question landed softly in the room. Professional, reasonable, and very precise. Marcus's fingers paused briefly against the edge of his tablet. Just for a second. Then he nodded. "Good question." His tone shifted into explanation mode. "Continue strengthening cross-team visibility and presentation readiness. We want to see consistent external-facing confidence. External-facing confidence." There it was, finally spoken out loud. Elena felt something inside her settle even further into place, because now the language matched the documentation. Limited exposure, monitor readiness, external confidence. The pattern was no longer implied, it was confirmed. She gave another small nod. "I can do that." Marcus's posture relaxed slightly. Conversation contained, outcome controlled. Exactly how he preferred these meetings to go. He closed the tablet. "Let us reconnect in a few weeks and review progress." Elena stood smoothly. Of course. She reached the door, hand on the handle, then paused. Just briefly. Long enough to be intentional. When she spoke again, her tone remained polite. Almost light. "I appreciate the clarity." Marcus gave a short nod. "Any time." Elena opened the door and stepped back into the hallway. The office noise washed over her again. Phones, keyboards, low conversation. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 2 days ago. But as she walked back towards her desk, her pulse remained slow and steady, because the last piece had just locked into place. This was no longer quiet speculation, no longer half-formed suspicion. It was structured, documented, and now verbally confirmed. Elena sat down at her desk, opened her private file, and added one more line. 9 a.m. readiness criteria verbally defined. External confidence cited. She saved the document, backed it up, closed the window. From the outside, Elena Ruiz still looked like the same reliable analyst she had been for 11 years. Calm, professional, cooperative. But inside, something precise and patient had fully come online, because Marcus Hale believed he had just given her direction. What he had actually given her was confirmation. And confirmation, Elena knew very well, was the point where quiet situations stopped being invisible. By midweek, Elena could feel the shift. Not announced, not visible on any org chart, but present in the small daily rhythms of the floor. Marcus stopped asking for her input in the open team threads. 2 calendar invites that normally would have included her arrived without her name attached. Even the casual drop-by questions from junior analysts had slowed. Subtle, clean, exactly how quiet repositioning usually worked. Elena kept her routine unchanged. That was the second decision she had made. If the ground was moving under her feet, she was not going to be the one to show imbalance first. So she delivered. The internal analytics Marcus requested. Early, error-free, documented. Her reply emails remained neutral and precise. No extra commentary, no visible friction. From the outside, Elena Ruiz looked fully aligned, fully cooperative, fully contained, which was exactly what Marcus appeared to expect. But privately, her file had grown, timestamp by timestamp, phrase by phrase. Language patterns logged with the same care she normally reserved for financial audits. At 11:27 a.m. Wednesday, another small piece clicked into place. Elena was reviewing a shared dashboard when a new notification appeared in the corner of her screen. Access update. Northbridge external brief folder permissions modified. Her pulse slowed. Not sped up, slowed. She opened the permissions panel. Her name remained listed. But the access level had changed. View only. No edit rights, no comment rights. Just view. Elena stared at the screen for 3 full seconds. There it was, the first technical adjustment. Small enough to look routine, clear enough to confirm direction. Her fingers moved calmly to her private document. 11:27 a.m. external brief permissions reduced to view only. She paused. Added one more word at the end. Confirmed, saved, backed up, closed. Across the aisle, Jenna rolled her chair closer. Hey, quick question on the vendor file. Elena turned smoothly, expression calm. Of course. Jenna pointed to her screen. Elena leaned over and walked her through the discrepancy in under 30 seconds. Clean. Helpful. Exactly the version of Elena the office had always known. Jenna smiled. You always catch this stuff faster than anyone. The compliment landed strangely now. Elena returned a small, polite smile. Habit, nothing more. Once Jenna rolled away again, Elena's gaze drifted back to Marcus's office. The blinds were half closed today. He was inside, speaking on the phone again. Pacing slowly. Controlled energy. Elena did not try to read his lips. She did not need to. The pattern was already visible. What mattered now was timing, because quiet repositioning always followed the same arc. Reduce visibility, limit access. Stabilize narrative, then eventually, formalize. Elena leaned back slightly in her chair. Her breathing remained steady, her hands completely still. For 11 years, she'd assumed that staying reliable was the safest position in any corporate structure. Now, she was watching that assumption being carefully tested in real time. Her phone buzzed softly. New message from Marcus. Let us add a short check-in Friday afternoon. Elena read it once, then replied. Sounds good, I will be ready. Send. She set the phone down. Eyes steady. Expression unchanged. Because the next phase was beginning to take shape. Not loud, not dramatic, but predictable. And as Elena reopened her analytics dashboard and resumed working with her usual calm precision, one quiet certainty settled deeper into place. If Marcus intended to keep moving this process forward, then Friday's meeting was not going to be a routine check-in. It was going to be the next controlled step, and this time Elena Ruiz was already ahead of the timing. Friday afternoon arrived too smoothly. No tension in the air, no urgent emails, no visible signals that anything important was about to happen, which Elena now understood very clearly was exactly how Marcus preferred it. Controlled environments, soft landings, clean conversations that left no sharp edges behind. At 1:58 p.m., Elena closed her current report and stood. Her pulse was steady, breathing even. The calm was not forced anymore. It was chosen. Marcus's office door was open again when she approached. He looked up immediately. Right on time, Elena. She stepped inside. Closed the door gently behind her. The blinds were pulled lower than earlier in the week, not fully shut, just enough to soften the view from the floor outside. Careful. Marcus gestured toward the chair. Have a seat. Elena sat. Back straight, hands resting lightly together. The version of her he clearly expected to see. Marcus folded his hands on the desk. I wanted to touch base on how things are progressing. His tone was warm, measured, almost reassuring. Elena nodded once. The internal analytics stream is fully on track. I sent the updated validation pass this morning. Marcus gave a small approving nod. Yes, I saw that. Strong as always. Always. There was that quiet ceiling again. He continued, as we move forward, I think it is important we keep you focused where you add the most consistent value. Elena felt the familiar pressure behind her ribs, but this time it did not spike. It sharpened. She let a calm second pass. Then she spoke, even tone, careful. I've been reviewing the readiness criteria you mentioned. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly with interest. Oh. Elena held his gaze. You referenced external confidence and visibility metrics. Marcus nodded slowly. Correct. Elena tilted her head just slightly. Still composed. Still polite. I would like to make sure we are aligned on how that is being evaluated. The air in the room shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Marcus leaned back a fraction. In what way? Elena reached into her notebook. Not rushed, not theatrical. She turned it toward him. Inside, her handwriting sat in clean, time-stamped lines. Email directive, meeting notes, permission changes, language patterns. Everything neat, factual, professional. Marcus's eyes dropped to the page. For the first time all week, his posture stilled. Not tense, but no longer relaxed. Elena's voice remained calm. I noticed several internal adjustments over the past few days. She did not accuse, did not push, just stated. Marcus's fingers tapped once against the desk. Soft, controlled. Elena continued. I want to ensure I am targeting the correct development areas rather than responding to informal positioning. The word positioning hung carefully in the air. Professional. Precise. Marcus's jaw shifted slightly. A small recalculation happening behind his eyes. When he spoke again, his tone was still measured. You're reading too much into routine planning language. Elena did not react, did not flinch. Instead, she gently turned one more page in her notebook, revealing the permission change log, then the meeting note, then the email, timestamp. All quiet, all factual, her voice stayed level. I am very comfortable adapting to defined performance goals. A small pause. But I work best when the criteria are transparent. Silence filled the office, not loud, not hostile, just thick enough to feel. Marcus studied the page again, then looked back up at her. Longer this time. The careful balance in the room had shifted, not broken, but no longer one-sided. When Marcus finally spoke, his tone had changed half a degree, more cautious. No one is questioning your contribution, Elena. There it was, not denial, adjustment. Elena gave a small nod. I appreciate that. Another quiet pause. Then Marcus exhaled slowly and leaned back in his chair. We can revisit your external readiness track next quarter. Not a promise, but no longer a quiet dismissal either. Elena closed her notebook calmly. That works for me. She stood. Marcus did not stop her, did not add anything further. As Elena reached the door, she paused just long enough to be intentional. Her voice remained polite, almost warm. Thank you for the clarification. Then she stepped back into the hallway. The office noise washed over her again. Keyboards, phones, low conversation. Everything looked exactly the same. But something fundamental had shifted. Not dramatic, not explosive, just enough. Because for the first time since Monday morning, the quiet repositioning had stopped moving in only one direction. Elena returned to her desk, sat down, opened her private file one last time, and typed slowly, Friday, 2:17. PM verbal positioning adjusted following documentation review. She saved the file, backed it up, then finally closed the window. Across the floor, the late afternoon light stretched long across the glass walls. Marcus's office door remained closed, but no new messages came, no new quiet adjustments. For now. Elena leaned back in her chair, her breathing slow, steady, because this week had not ended with a promotion. not with a victory speech, but with something far more realistic: visibility, leverage, time. And in offices like this, Elena Ruiz knew very well that sometimes the strongest move was not the loud one. It was the moment you stopped being invisible. If this moment felt uncomfortably familiar, you are not the only one who has seen quiet decisions happen behind polished conference room doors. Stories like this unfold every day in places that look perfectly professional on the surface. If you want more real-world moments where the truth shows up one careful detail at a time, stay close to this channel and keep watching what happens next.